The circular chamber of the galactic concordats, high council glimmered with an otherworldly elegance that belied the tension permeating the air. Floating holographic displays cast shifting blue and purple hues across the faces of the assembled delegates, each representing one of the core species that truly governed galactic affairs. The Xylar Metacorporation's sleek, almost translucent representatives occupied the most prominent positions, their subtle bioluminescence pulsing with barely contained impatience. Beside them, the stocky, heavily armored delegates from the Vrelian Republic maintained rigid postures, their four eyes constantly scanning the room with military precision. The hulking Thorg Imperium representatives remained still as statues, their crystalline exoskeletons reflecting the chamber's light in mesmerizing patterns. Ambassador Kalen of the Xylar moved to the center of the chamber, his elongated fingers adjusting the gravitational field around him to create an imposing presence. "The Earth's situation requires our attention, but hardly our concern," he began, his voice simultaneously melodious and condescending. "Their request for renegotiation of trade terms is, as always, symptomatic of their limited understanding of galactic economics." Several delegates exchanged knowing glances. Earth, admitted to the Concordat barely 50 standard years ago, remained a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Useful for their industrial output and surprisingly innovative technical solutions, humans were nonetheless considered primitive in their political and cultural development. General Zorgith of the Vrelian Republic, her armored exoskeleton clicking as she shifted position, spoke next. "The strategic value of Earth's solar system cannot be ignored. Their position along the Orion-Cygnus trade corridor makes them useful as a potential military checkpoint, regardless of their socio-political immaturity." Ambassador Kalen waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, General. No one disputes Earth's geographic utility. What we're discussing is their persistent delusion of equivalence with the founding species." His facial membrane rippled in what passed for amusement among the Xylar. "They provide adequate industrial capacity and some amusingly clever technical solutions at competitive rates. That is their place in our order." The chamber's atmosphere lightened as several delegates chuckled or made their species equivalent gestures of derision. Earth's representatives, not present for this closed session, had become something of a running joke in the Concordat's inner circles. Their earnest diplomacy, their naive belief in fair exchange, their quaint notions of sovereignty, all provided entertainment for species that measured their civilizations in millennia rather than centuries. "I would remind the Council," interjected a Thord representative, voice resonating through crystal-lined vocal chambers, "that the Nexus network developed by humans has proven convenient. Their integration of quantum entanglement communications with superluminal coordination protocols has streamlined our logistics considerably." "Convenient, yes," Kalen agreed, "but hardly revolutionary. The Xylar had similar systems in development. The humans simply stumbled upon a workable solution first, and they were adequately compensated with membership in our illustrious Concordat." His tone made clear just how generous he considered this arrangement. The holographic display shifted to show complex schematics of the Nexus network, a vast interstellar communications and logistics coordination system that had, over the past 3 decades, become increasingly integrated into the Concordat's infrastructure. What had begun as a human innovation had grown into the nervous system of galactic commerce and governance, utilized by all member species, but still primarily maintained by Earth technicians. "The intelligence reports from Sol System do concern me," General Zorgith remarked, her 4 eyes narrowing simultaneously. "Unusual activity patterns around their orbital facilities, unexplained shifts in resource allocation, and communications anomalies detected near the Kuiper Belt." Ambassador Kalen's bioluminescence pulsed dismissively. "Your military mind sees conspiracy where there is merely incompetence, General. The humans lack both the capability and strategic vision to pose any genuine threat to Concordat interests." A junior Xylar aide approached Kalen, whispering something that caused his membrane to flutter in annoyance. It seems the Earth delegation is insisting on addressing the full council regarding their trade terms, and he paused with theatrical exasperation, data access rights. I suggest we humor them briefly before concluding our real business. The chamber's doors parted to admit 3 humans dressed in the simple blue uniforms that designated Earth representatives. Their leader, a woman with graying hair and determined eyes, stepped forward with dignity that seemed painfully practiced to the watching delegates. Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Concordat, she began, her voice steady. On behalf of Earth's unified government, I formally request reconsideration of Schedule 7 trade restrictions and expanded access rights to the Concordat's xenobiological database, as originally promised in the Ambassador Chun, Kalen interrupted, not bothering to hide his impatience. These matters have been thoroughly addressed in subcommittee. The Concordat has determined that Earth's industrial development does not yet warrant Schedule 6 classification, and your scientific establishments have not demonstrated the ethical frameworks necessary for unrestricted xenobiological data access. The Earth ambassador's composure remained intact despite the deliberate humiliation. With respect, Ambassador Kalen, our submission included comprehensive evidence of Earth's compliance with all Schedule 6 prerequisites. Additionally, the original membership agreement explicitly guaranteed progressive data access after 30 standard years of. Your evidence was reviewed and found wanting. Kalen cut in again, his bioluminescence flashing in patterns that made the other Xylar delegates stir in amusement. Perhaps in another decade or two, your understanding of interspecies economics will have matured sufficiently to grasp why these limitations are actually in Earth's best interest. General Zorgith made no attempt to hide her disdain. The military applications alone of the xenobiological data you seek would be problematic in human hands. Your species' history hardly inspires confidence in your restraint. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Earth ambassador's colleagues shifted uncomfortably, but she remained steadfast. I must formally register Earth's protest against this decision and request that our objections be entered into the permanent record of these proceedings. Kalen performed the Xylar equivalent of shrug. So noted, the Concordat appreciates Earth's enthusiasm for fuller participation. In time, with proper guidance, perhaps your naive perspectives will mature into a more nuanced understanding of galactic realities. Laughter, or its various species equivalents, echoed through the chamber as the Earth delegation was effectively dismissed with patronizing finality. What none of the delegates noticed was the brief, almost imperceptible exchange of glances between the Earth representatives as they departed. Not one of resignation or defeat, but of cold, calculated confirmation. The line had been drawn. The decision had been made. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in a chamber that officially did not exist, Director of Security Elena Rostova stood before a holographic display far more sophisticated than anything the Concordat had witnessed from Earth technology. Her angular features, illuminated by the blue glow of the projection, remained impassive as she reviewed the latest intelligence. "Play it again," she commanded, her Russian accent still noticeable despite decades of international service. The hologram shifted to display a recording, intercepted from a supposedly secure Xylar communication channel, showing Ambassador Kalen in private conversation with other Concordat officials. Earth's value is entirely instrumental, the Xylar's translated voice stated plainly. Their solar system's position, their industrial capacity, their surprisingly adaptive workforce, these are assets to be utilized. But their cultural and political assimilation must proceed according to schedule. The phase dependency protocol remains on track. Within 2 generations, Earth's economic sovereignty will be functionally non-existent, and within 4, their cultural identity will be sufficiently diluted to prevent any meaningful resistance. Rostova paused the recording with a gesture. "And the military assessment?" she asked, turning to the uniformed figure standing at attention nearby. Admiral Jianli, Supreme Commander of Earth's clandestine Deep Fleet, stepped forward. Unlike the Public Earth Defense Force, a modest collection of ships permitted by Concordat regulations. The Deep Fleet existed entirely off official records, constructed in secret facilities throughout the Kuiper Belt. General Zorgatha's contingency plans were exactly as our intelligence suggested, Admiral Lee replied, his tone measured and precise. Earth is designated as a strategic buffer zone, a first line of defense to absorb attacks in any conflict with non-Concordat forces. Their simulations explicitly accept total human casualties as an acceptable cost to protect Vrelian core systems. Rostova nodded, unsurprised but nonetheless disgusted. And the technological containment directives? A third figure emerged from the shadows of the command center. Dr. Aris Thorne, chief architect of the Nexus Network, looked exhausted but resolute. His tall frame seemed bent under invisible weight, his dark skin contrasting with prematurely white hair, the result of years working on the most consequential technological project in human history. The Xyler Directive to the Scientific Oversight Committee is explicitly designed to prevent human technological advancement beyond certain parameters, Thorne explained, his deep voice carrying the hint of his West African origins. The xenobiological database restrictions are particularly telling. They're specifically engineered to prevent us from developing the biotechnological applications that would allow humans to compete with Xyler evolutionary advantages. Rostova's eyes narrowed. Have they detected any of our developments? Thorne shook his head. No, the compartmentalization protocols have held. Our public research follows their expected trajectories. The quantum laboratories on Europa, the biomimetic research on Titan, the deep space propulsion tests in the Oort cloud, all remain undetected. As far as the Concordat knows, we are precisely where they want us to be. Clever toolmakers dependent on their approval and guidance. And Project Chimera? Rostova asked, her voice dropping almost to a whisper despite the absolute security of their location. A thin smile crossed Thorne's face for the first time. Fully operational and ready for activation. The kill switches and logic backdoors have been embedded in the Nexus network since its inception, invisible even to the Concordat's best systems analysts because they're built into the fundamental architecture itself. He approached the holographic display, gesturing to bring up a complex lattice of interconnected nodes. The beauty of it is that we won't destroy the network. We'll simply isolate Earth completely while simultaneously crippling the Concordat's core coordination, communication, and logistics capabilities. The network will appear to be functioning while actually entering a state of functional paralysis. No obvious attack pattern, just cascading system failures that will appear to be internal network instabilities. Admiral Lee joined them at the display. The Shadow Fleet vessels are in position at strategic junction points, but remain completely cloaked. Our deep cover operatives throughout Concordat space have received preliminary orders to prepare for withdrawal or secondary sabotage actions when the signal is given. Rostova studied both men for a long moment. 30 years of preparation. The most elaborate deception in human history. She paused, the weight of the decision before them palpable in the air. Once we activate Chimera, there's no going back. We will be effectively cutting ourselves off from the galaxy. A galaxy that planned to exploit us, use us as cannon fodder, and gradually erase our cultural identity, Thorne reminded her. The Concordat never saw us as equals, just as useful primitives to be managed. The ambassadorial team has just confirmed the final diplomatic rejection, Admiral Lee added. Exactly as we anticipated. All peaceful avenues have been exhausted. Rostova turned back to the holographic display, cycling through images of Earth, its cities, its oceans, its people going about lives largely unaware of the true nature of their galactic status or the decision now facing their leaders. Isolation is preferable to subjugation, she said finally. Humanity rose without their help. We'll continue to evolve without their permission. Her voice hardened with resolve. Activate Chimera Protocol. Dr. Thorne moved to a dedicated console, his fingers dancing over a biometric interface. Initiating final authentication sequence, he announced. Quantum key verification complete. Neural pattern confirmation acknowledged. He paused, finger hovering over the final command input. Chimera protocol activated. There was no dramatic explosion, no blaring alarms. The moment that would forever alter the course of galactic history passed with nothing more than the soft beep of confirmation from Thorn's console. Now, Rostovus said quietly, we wait. In the gleaming financial district of Xylar Prime, a junior trade analyst frowned at her monitoring station. Several transaction authentication sequences from the Betelgeuse shipping lanes had failed to synchronize properly. She ran a standard diagnostic, found nothing amiss, and filed a routine maintenance request before returning to her regular duties. 2 hours later, a Vrelian cargo fleet commander found himself puzzled when 3 of his vessels became stuck at a superluminal jump gate due to routing authentication errors. He ordered manual overrides, communicated his frustration to fleet headquarters, and continued operations with minimal delay. Across Thord territory, internal communication systems began occasionally transmitting random data packets. Technical teams attributed the anomalies to solar flare activity and implemented standard correction protocols. These minor incidents, scattered across thousands of light years, initially registered as nothing more than the normal technical glitches inevitable in any complex system. But as the Chimera protocol fully activated, the carefully designed cascade began to accelerate. On the luxury space habitat that served as the Concordat's primary financial clearing center, alarms began sounding in the system's control center. Transaction verification errors had jumped from statistical background noise to systemic failure in less than an hour. Emergency backup systems activated automatically, only to encounter similar instabilities. What in the 7 moons is happening? Demanded the Xylar operations director, his bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. Unknown, director, responded the chief systems analyst, her appendages moving frantically across multiple interfaces. There's no sign of external intrusion or malicious code. The network appears to be experiencing some kind of internal desynchronization at the quantum entanglement level. Is it the Earth-maintained sections? Have their technicians made some incompetent error? The analyst hesitated. That's the strange part, Director. We can't establish any communication with Earth or any Earth-maintained network nodes. All attempts at connection are meeting with authentication failures. The Director's membrane rippled with alarm. Escalate this to security level alpha. Now, similar scenes were unfolding across Concordat space. On the Vrelian military command station orbiting their homeworld, General Zorgith stormed into the Strategic Operations Center, her exoskeleton radiating heat from her rapid movement through the habitat. Status report, she barked. A junior officer snapped to attention. General, we're experiencing widespread coordination failures across the fleet management system. Deployment orders aren't reaching frontline units. Resource allocation algorithms are generating nonsensical results, and defensive grid synchronization has dropped to 63% effectiveness. Cause: initial assessment points to Nexus network instability, but we haven't identified the root cause. Our technical teams report that the system architecture itself appears to be reorganizing somehow. Zorgith's secondary eyes narrowed in suspicion. An Earth. Complete communications blackout, General. No signals in or out of their solar system since approximately 0700 Galactic Standard Time. The General's intuition, honed through centuries of military service, sent alarms ringing through her consciousness. Lock down all critical systems. Implement emergency protocols Alpha 9. I want every available intelligence asset focused on the Sol system immediately. But as the hours passed, the situation only deteriorated further. The Nexus network, the invisible backbone that had grown to coordinate everything from interstellar shipping to planetary defense systems, for financial transactions to medical supply chains, didn't collapse catastrophically, but instead descended into a state of unpredictable unreliability that proved far more damaging. Data arrived corrupted, delayed, or not at all. Automated systems, dependent on network coordination, began making increasingly erratic decisions. On major space stations, Docking control systems lost their ability to coordinate arrivals and departures, resulting in collisions and near misses. Emergency services found themselves unable to respond effectively as communication and coordination broke down. 26 hours after the activation of Chimera Protocol, Ambassador Kalin found himself in an emergency session of the Concordat's Inner Council, facing representatives whose usual composure had given way to barely controlled panic. "This is clearly an attack," insisted the Thor delegate, crystal voice chambers vibrating with agitation. And the timing, coupled with Earth's suspicious silence, points to an obvious culprit. Kalin's bioluminescence pulsed with skepticism. The humans? They lack both the technological sophistication and the strategic boldness for such an action. Their diplomatic protests were dismissed just before this crisis began. This is correlation, not causation. General Zorgatha's armored fist struck the council table with enough force to crack its polished surface. "Your arrogance blinds you, Kalin. While you dismiss them as primitive toolmakers, they built the very network we've all become dependent upon. A network that is now failing in ways our best analysts cannot explain or repair." "The technical teams report no evidence of external attack," Kalin countered, though with less certainty than before. "The system appears to be experiencing some form of internal degradation. Perhaps a design flaw that—" "A deliberate design flaw," interrupted a new voice. All eyes turned to the Concordat's chief scientific advisor, a Lauritian whose gaseous form swirled with agitation within its containment field. "Our deepest analysis suggests the network isn't breaking down randomly. It's executing extremely complex protocols that were embedded in its foundational architecture. Protocols specifically designed to be invisible until activated." Silence fell over the council chamber as the implications sank in. "You're suggesting the humans planted these kill switches from the very beginning?" Kalin finally asked, his voice barely audible. "Not kill switches," the Lauritian corrected. "The network isn't dying. It's transforming into a state of controlled dysfunction. And yes, the evidence increasingly suggests this was planned from the earliest implementation stages. While we incorporated their technology into our most critical systems, they apparently built in the means to cripple it, and us, whenever they chose." General Zorgatha's expression darkened. "And we handed them this power because we couldn't imagine them capable of such foresight. Because we saw only what our prejudices allowed us to see." "Can it be stopped?" demanded the Thor representative. The Lauritian's gaseous form contracted in the equivalent of a negative gesture. "Not without Earth's cooperation. The protocols are too deeply embedded, too elegantly integrated into the system's quantum architecture. We would essentially need to rebuild the entire network from scratch, which would take decades. Then we go to Earth," Zorgath declared. "We assemble a fleet and demand their immediate assistance in restoring the network." "With what fleet, General?" asked the Lauritian. "Your military coordination systems are operating at less than 40% efficiency. Navigation systems are increasingly unreliable. The very tools you would need to organize such an expedition are among those most severely compromised." As if to emphasize this point, the chamber's own systems flickered, plunging the room briefly into darkness before emergency backup power engaged. "We are facing a cascade of failures across all critical infrastructure," the Lauritian continued once the system stabilized. "Food distribution networks, energy allocation systems, medical supply chains, all degrading. Several outlying colonies are already reporting critical shortages. And without reliable communication, coordinating any relief efforts is nearly impossible." Ambassador Kalin, his bioluminescence now dim with shock, struggled to process this reversal of fortune. "How? How could we not have seen this coming?" "Because we chose not to see them clearly," Zorgath answered, her military directness cutting through the diplomatic niceties. "We saw tools, not equals. Resources, not rivals. We planned to exploit them, and they apparently knew it all along." A junior aide rushed into the chamber, bypassing normal protocols in his urgency. "Ambassadors, General, we've received a transmission. It appears to be of Earth origin, but through channels outside the Nexus network. "Display it," ordered Kalen. The holographic projector in the center of the chamber activated, revealing a simple text message rather than a visual communication. "You have cut your own line. Enjoy the silence." 3 standard months after the activation of the Chimera Protocol, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The great trading hubs that had once pulsed with the constant flow of goods and information now stood half empty, operating at a fraction of their former capacity. Manual systems and pre-Nexus technologies had been hastily pressed back into service, but they could not begin to replace the seamless coordination that had been lost. The Xylar Metacorporation, whose economic dominance had relied heavily on their ability to orchestrate complex financial transactions across thousands of worlds simultaneously, found their influence drastically diminished. Without the real-time data flows that had once allowed them to react instantly to market fluctuations, their previously unassailable economic advantage had evaporated. The Vrelian Republic's military superiority similarly waned as their fleets, unable to coordinate effectively across vast distances, were forced to contract to defensible perimeters around their core systems. Worlds that had once depended on their protection now found themselves abandoned, left to fend for themselves against pirates and opportunistic raiders who thrived in the new disorder. Even the seemingly immutable Thorg Imperium began to fracture as distant provinces, cut off from central authority and resources, declared independence or formed new alliances of necessity with neighboring systems. In the echoing halls of what had once been the Concordat's central administrative complex, Ambassador Kalen, now stripped of much of his former power and influence, met with General Zorgith and a handful of other former council members. Their once immaculate chamber was dimly lit to conserve energy, the automated environmental systems. Long since failed, the Treshus sector has formally seceded, reported a Vrelian intelligence officer. They formed a mutual defense pact with the Outer Rim Collective and 3 formerly independent systems. The 7th Financial Union has collapsed entirely, added a haggard Xylar economic advisor. 17 banking worlds have reverted to physical currency exchange. Interstellar commerce in the sector has declined by 78%. Zorgith's once gleaming exoskeleton was dull with lack of proper maintenance. And still no word from Earth. Complete silence, confirmed a communications specialist. Their solar system remains isolated behind what appears to be a highly sophisticated quantum barrier. The few probes we've managed to send that far have either failed to penetrate or never returned. They couldn't have predicted this level of collapse, Kalen said, his once melodious voice now flat with exhaustion. Surely they didn't intend to destroy interstellar civilization itself. "I don't believe destruction was their goal," Zorgith replied thoughtfully. "They didn't destroy the Nexus network. They selectively crippled it while completely isolating themselves. This wasn't vengeance. It was self-preservation, at the expense of trillions of lives across thousands of worlds." Kalen protested. "Shortages are becoming critical on dependent worlds. The death toll from system failures, resource deprivation, and opportunistic conflicts is already incalculable. The situation we created," Zorgith reminded him harshly. "We treated them as inferiors while making ourselves increasingly dependent on their technology. We planned their eventual subjugation while trusting them with our most critical systems. We earned this reckoning through our own arrogance." A Thorg representative, his crystalline exoskeleton cracked and imperfectly repaired, spoke for the first time. "The power shifts continue. Reports from the Sagittarius Arm indicate that species we once marginalized are forming new coalitions in the power vacuum. The Draven multitude, the Sorae Sea communion, even the primitive Tellurian clusters, all expanding their influence while we contract. And piracy continues to flourish," added the Vrelian intelligence officer. "The Black Star Syndicate now effectively controls trade in 7 sectors. The Void Raiders have seized control of the Perigean Gateway. Without coordinated military response, lawlessness spreads unchecked." Kalen's bioluminescence flickered with what might have been genuine remorse. "When we look back at this moment in our history, If our civilization survived to do so, what will we say? That we destroyed ourselves through our own hubris? That we could not imagine being outsmarted by those we consider beneath us? Perhaps, Zorgith suggested, we will simply recognize that the galaxy is changed forever. The old order, with its hierarchies and assumptions of inherent superiority, could not endure. Whatever rises from these ashes will need to be built on different principles. "And Earth?" asked the Thor representative. "What of them in this new order?" Zorgith's 4 eyes gazed into the middle distance, contemplating. "They remain an unknown. Perhaps they will emerge eventually, when they feel secure enough to do so. Perhaps they will develop in isolation, becoming something entirely new. Or perhaps they are watching us even now, waiting to see what lessons we have learned from our fall." The dim lights of the chamber flickered, a constant reminder of their precarious circumstances. "Whatever their fate," Kalen concluded, "ours now lies in our own hands, as perhaps it always should have. We can no longer rely on the systems and hierarchies that once seemed eternal. We must rebuild, world by world, connection by connection." "And if Earth should return to the galactic community?" asked the Thorg. A long silence followed before Zorgith answered. "Then we would be wise to approach them with the respect of equals, something we should have done from the beginning." In the vast silence of interstellar space, Earth continued its solitary journey around its unremarkable yellow star. Its quantum barriers, impenetrable to outside observation, concealed whatever path humanity had chosen for itself after cutting the final ties to a galaxy that had planned to exploit them. The great powers had failed to recognize a fundamental truth until it was too late. Those who build the networks control the connections. And in the end, humanity had simply exercised the ultimate power, not of conquest or domination, but of disconnection. The galaxy's plans for Earth had indeed ended when humans cut off the line.